Kalorama, a recorded books, Highbridge imprint, presents What's Left Unsaid, My Life at the Center of Power, Politics, and Crisis, by Melissa Derosa. Read by Melissa Derosa. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, in loving memory of my Nana, Coradina Dina Derosa. Prologue. What Just Happened. August 12th, 2021. Are you okay? My sister, Jessica, came into my dark bedroom. It was shortly after 6 a.m., I noted in the moment, even though time had become insignificant to me. A profound irony given that it used to define my life. Uh-huh. I kept my voice to a whisper, desperate to numb my pain. Can I get you something? She asked, rubbing my back. Water, coffee, an egg sandwich? She was deeply concerned about me. Rightfully so. I love you. I just need a few minutes, I responded without moving. The handful of words alone required more energy than I had to spare, but I didn't want her to worry. Older by 2 years, Jessica had always been more than my big sister. She was my best friend. Okay, Missy Monster, Jessica said. I'm here, whatever you need. She trailed off, running her fingers through my unwashed hair. She wanted so badly to help me, but she couldn't. No one could. I'd been whisked to Jessica's in-laws' house in West Yarmouth on Cape Cod the day before, with photographers stationed at my Brooklyn Heights townhouse, my father's Albany and Lake houses, my mother's house in Hudson, New York, and my younger brother Joey's house upstate. There was nowhere else I could think of to go. In what felt like some bizarre 1990s thriller handoff, Joey had taken custody of me in a dark parking garage at Dad's office near the Capitol in Albany, where we'd successfully evaded the paparazzi. The memory was a blur, like watching a movie about a protagonist who was not me. Now, an unfamiliar guest room 228 miles away had become my cocoon. I burrowed beneath the white bedspread. The house felt hushed, as if it, too, were holding its breath, waiting for this to end. Just months earlier, everything in my life had possessed purpose and meaning. At age 38, I was the most senior member of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's team, leading the nation through a once-in-a-century pandemic, making life-or-death decisions, projecting our administration's competence to an admiring world. But now, I had been transformed into a caricature I didn't recognize, a person I never was and didn't want to be. It had all unfolded too quickly to slow or stop, like falling onto the tracks of an oncoming train. The words, "What just happened?" wouldn't stop reverberating through my entire body. None of it made sense. At the thought of this, I began to sob for what felt like the zillionth time in the last 24 hours. I was in so much pain. I just wanted it all to end. Chapter 1. What defines an emergency? What do we think about putting surrogacy at the top? I asked, leaning back in the brown leather chair that had been a fixture in the office for years, ankles crossed on top of my desk. It was January 3rd, 2020, and 2 floors below, the streets of Albany were desolate, as was usual at that time of year, with everyone home for the Christmas holiday. Everyone, that is, except us. My longtime colleague, Jim Malatras, the professor, as we called him, stood across the room at the whiteboard we were using to track policy ideas for the year. Many of us had nicknames, a playful gesture that sometimes eased the seriousness and stress of our work. We were mere days away from the start of the legislative session, and we were still debating which issues our boss, Governor Andrew Cuomo, would want prioritized. Sure, Melissa, I'll put it next to high-speed rail, and maybe, just maybe, it'll get done by the time Max is in college, Jim teased. Max, Jim's 7-year-old son, sat nearby playing on his iPad. Max had grown up in the halls of the Capitol, shadowing Jim's every move when his dad had served as Cuomo's director of state operations. Jim had since moved on to become president of Empire State College. But, devoted to the core, he remained always on call for us in times of crisis, and the task at hand met that criteria. "Ha ha, you're so funny," I said. "This is our year. It's getting done, with or without you." Although legal in 46 states, surrogacy was against the law in New York, a policy hangover from the 1980s, when feminists led the charge to ban the practice for fear it would lead to the exploitation of the wombs of impoverished women by the rich and powerful who wanted children, but not enough to go through the physical act of pregnancy. Norms change, and while those earlier efforts were well-intentioned at the time, feminists of today viewed the practice more through a lens of compassion than commerce, as a way for infertile women and gay couples to fulfill their dreams of parenthood. Overturning the ban was staunchly opposed by the majority of women in the Democratic-led Assembly, many of whom were over 60 and still firmly rooted in their Gloria Steinem-led beliefs from decades earlier. The Speaker of the Assembly would defer to them, and, for the last few years, attempting to get the measure through became something of a fool's errand. But that wouldn't stop us. Much like marriage equality or the $15 minimum wage, advocates, in this case infertile women and same-sex couples hoping to create families, came to us to get it done, because our team made the impossible possible. And this year, we wouldn't let them down. "You've got it, MDR, then it goes on the whiteboard," Jim responded, scribbling the words surrogacy/bullet train-MDR at the top of the already incoherent whiteboard in front of us. To the extent that I had an office nickname, MDR was mine. Tracy, the longest-serving of my assistants, popped her head into the doorway. "Melissa, you told me to tell you when it's 3 o'clock, she said, her tone almost apologetic, even though she was simply following my instructions. "It's 3 o'clock. I glanced down at my iPhone and confirmed it for myself. It was, in fact, 3 o'clock. And I needed to get on the road. I had actually needed to get on the road an hour earlier, although that was never realistic, not given the fact that the governor's annual State of the State address was days away and we were still nowhere. I could feel my pulse begin to race while the excuses for my inevitable tardiness churned. Matt, my husband of 3 years, would be annoyed and passive-aggressive. I would be defensive, never acknowledging an inch of possible wrongdoing. That was the way, our way. No matter how well-intentioned, my husband had an expectation that I would disappoint, and I lived up to it every single time. "Petro is on the ramp," Tracy said, referring to my driver that afternoon, John Petrosino. Petro, as everyone referred to him, was essentially a Hell's Angel frozen in time. He wore a black leather vest with acid-washed jeans. He couldn't do enough to be helpful. He filled up your gas tank without asking. He put your water of choice, Saratoga Sparkling for me, in the cup holder. He kept your favorite snack, milk chocolate Cadbury eggs, in the glove compartment, just in case. Jim looked at me in disbelief. "Hey, Derosa," he said. "What are you, keeping banker's hours? The speech is in a few days. Does the boss know you're sneaking out?" "Matt is going to California in the morning," I said, my right arm finding its way through the tear in the silk lining of my long, fitted black peacoat. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow, and yes, he knows and is okay with it." I kicked off my stilettos and slid into the ballet flats tucked under my desk for the ride home, grabbing the worn, overstuffed canvas duffel bag beside me. "Seriously, I'll be back in the morning, and I'll be on my phone every 5 seconds. Please, please help me carry this ball over the finish line." I batted my blue eyes playfully at Jim, knowing he was the only person who could possibly help the governor get the speech, and more important, the 500-page policy book full of proposals, done in time. "You're lucky I love you, MDR," he said. His smile let me off the hook. "I am," I replied as I scurried out, glancing up at Tracy, Farah, and Katie, the 3 executive assistants the governor and I both relied upon to get through the day. "Please put any calls through to my cell, and have a good night. Thanks, guys," I said as the door closed behind me. I waved goodbye to the troopers standing guard in the hall and hurried down the stairs. I flicked my pass at the electronic door opener and walked into an Arctic blast, the frigid air practically knocking me sideways. Snow flurries were flying, but the door of the black GMC Jimmy was open, waiting for me. Of course it was. Petro was happy to freeze for my convenience. I climbed in and slammed the door shut. I looked at the clock. 3:38. Fuck. It wasn't enough that our senior staff was still struggling to put the year's policy proposals to bed, or that my girlfriends were pissed that I had missed our annual post-Christmas Cornell get-together to see everyone's children and husbands. No, I would soon be confronted by Matt with the fact that I was a failure. A failure as a wife, a failure as a partner, a failure as a friend. And as much as I wanted to, as much as I struggled to, I couldn't make him happy, or myself for that matter. I had, in short order, become a crushing New York cliché. That woman who, to the outside world, seemingly accomplishes everything: marriage, career, family, friends, while privately feeling like I was succeeding at absolutely nothing. Bring! Like a Swiss watch, Matt instinctively knew I was going to be late, and he was going to make sure I knew he knew. "Hello?" I answered, dreading the conversation that was coming. "Oh, hello. Is this the one and only Ms. Melissa Derosa?" Matt asked coyly. "Who's calling?" I played along, hoping I could flirt my way out of the inevitable. "I think she may be expecting me. It's her husband, Matthew Lawrence Wing. The guy who's leaving in the morning? I'm pretty sure she's running late for dinner. Can you check with her?" "Hey, I'll have you know," I protested, breaking character, "I'm already on the road." "Oh, really? What time did you leave?" Matt taunted. 45 minutes ago, and I'll be on time and ready for adult conversation, appropriately dressed and not at all preoccupied with work." "So," Matt shot back, "you left 5 minutes ago, you'll be 30 minutes late for dinner, and you'd like me to call you an Uber to get to dinner. Got it. See you soon." Click. While his tone was sarcastic, everything Matt said struck at the core of where we were and how we got there. A communications exec for Uber, he was relocating to company headquarters in San Francisco and would live in a corporate apartment for 3 months. On advice of our couples therapist, our third couples therapist. This one had lasted longer than the others, but that may have been because we both gave up fighting each other and for one another. It was easier to go along to get along. And this time, 3.5 short years into our marriage, the recommendation was separation and cutting off communication. Tonight was a final goodbye before we went dark for 90 days to decide whether we missed each other or could live without one another. Of course, I would be late. Brooklyn is a 2.5-hour commute from Albany, assuming traffic and the weather both cooperated. But none of that mattered anyway, because as far as Matt was concerned, the only reason I was ever late was because I was putting work first. That condemnation upset me more than any other. After all, we had met while working together in the governor's office, when I was communications director and Matt was press secretary. He knew the landscape of my professional life better than anyone else. It was part of the intimate connection we shared. Fluency in the same second language. I didn't wait for Petro to bring the car to a complete stop before thanking him for the ride and opening the door to jump out. I sprinted up the narrow stairs of our townhouse and went straight to my closet, rifling to find a pair of patent leather Mary Janes and the black, strappy Laline dress Matt had bought me for Christmas. The Uber driver Matt sent was set to give me less than a 5-star rating after my stress manifested into me being short with him for no good reason as he drove down the steep hill to the River Cafe. It was incredible that the two of us had fallen in love with this particular restaurant. It required a jacket and played jazz and was far too stuffy for Matt's pretentious preference. And it was in Brooklyn proper, not Soho or the West Village, where I preferred to dine. Not unlike our unlikely marriage, our favorite spot perfectly suited us in ways neither of us preferred to acknowledge. The reservation was for 6:15. I arrived at 6:43. "I ordered the caviar and you're getting the branzino," Matt greeted me. "You were late and I was worried we'd lose the table. So, like it or not, that's your menu for the evening, and we'll all just have to learn to deal with it." He glanced up at me with a half smirk, knowing how happy I'd be with the order. "I'm sorry, Yes, I know. And how is the state of the state going?" "It's nowhere. We're nowhere." But I trailed off. "That's not what we should be focused on tonight. How is this going to work? I know things haven't been easy, but you're my best friend." I knew this day was coming, but couldn't until this moment acknowledge what it would mean. "Melissa, we're stuck," he responded, closing his menu. "We've been stuck for a long time. Either we move forward or we move back. This isn't fair to either of us. I love you, but I'm not sure that's enough anymore. And we're too young to compromise our lives." He sounded resigned to this fate. I would have preferred to ignore it altogether. But defeat trumped denial. "What if I need you?" I wondered aloud. While our relationship was strained, he was my other half, and I knew how much I would miss him. He was the one I trusted and turned to for advice and companionship. My person. "We have rules," Matt gently reminded me. "We discussed it in therapy. And we cannot do the thing where we call or text or ask how each other's families are doing. That's part of it. That's the whole point." "So we just don't speak for 90 days? "No," he said. "Unless?" "Unless what?" I asked, hopeful, though I knew better. "Unless it's an emergency, an honest-to-God emergency," he said, wiping a tear off my cheek. Everything else was to be dealt with via email, devoid of emotion. "Okay," I said, swallowing back hard. "But what defines an emergency?" "You know, I don't know," he paused. "But we'll know it if it happens." Chapter 2. It's the Flu. As I stared up at the ceiling, my body stretched atop a gurney at the NYU Langone Fertility Center in Manhattan, all I could think about was why I'd waited so long to do this. How could I have let it get to this point without a plan? I'd never been a procrastinator. A precocious child who asked questions incessantly, I was hungry to understand things big and small about how the world worked. Who plows after a snowstorm? Who says you can't drive more than 65 miles per hour? Who decides how many days we have to go to school? Who were all these wizards behind all these curtains? All answers led to government in some form or fashion. And the more questions I asked, the more I learned about the impact that politics and government had on our own family. Making the complex machinery of daily life run reliably didn't rely on magic after all. It took people who were capable and trustworthy. And politics, from my earliest perspective, was never remote or lofty. In fact, I couldn't imagine a job that was more deeply personal. It was part of my DNA. The daughter of a successful restaurateur, my mother, Melody, was raised in West Irondequoit, an affluent suburb of Rochester, New York, where she was captain of the cheerleading squad at the high-performing public school she attended. The son of Italian immigrants, my father was raised in a working-class neighborhood, consisting primarily of Blacks, Puerto Ricans, and Italians, in the city of Rochester, where he was captain of the varsity soccer team at the all-boys Catholic school he attended. They met at a YMCA tennis camp at age 16, quickly fell in love, and married after high school graduation, a marriage that would last 28 years. It was an act of defiance that severed my mother's relationship with her own parents, who disapproved of their new son-in-law's blue-collar background. Intent on making it work, Mom and Dad attended college at night while juggling odd jobs from waiting tables to construction and retail by day to afford the rent on their one-bedroom apartment. Then, when they were 20, my sister came along, followed by me 2 years later, and my brother 11 months after that. Kids themselves, my parents suddenly had 3 children under 4 at home, increasing the pressure to make ends meet. Eventually, Dad got a job at the General Motors assembly plant where his father worked. That was a big deal. GM plants were unionized, and unions were a source of strength and fairness for the employees. There was nothing academic or intellectual about it. It was real and it was practical. Unions provided health care, worker protections, retirement benefits, and negotiating strength. Unions meant a better life for our family, and the union movement was synonymous with the Democratic Party. As a child, I saw them as one and the same. My father became active in the powerful United Auto Workers Union and was selected to participate in a summer course at the Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations, an Ivy League accomplishment unfathomable to a young working-class inner-city man. Afterward, in 1986, the UAW selected my father to be dispatched to a local campaign as the union's representative. The campaign was for New York's 30th Congressional District in Rochester, and the candidate was Louise Slaughter, a tough-talking, no-nonsense Kentucky native with a Southern drawl. Louise was running against an entrenched incumbent in an overwhelmingly Republican district. Her opponent believed in smaller government. She fought for social services. He was a staunch conservative. She was a working-class centrist. A Democrat hadn't won the seat since 1963, and she wasn't supposed to. A fact my father told me over and over to manage my 4-year-old expectations as we went door to door together to rally the vote. But, against all odds, Slaughter did win by just 1 point. And in that moment, feeling the special high reserved for winning campaigns and innocent preschoolers, I thought, I can do that too. Afterward, Slaughter asked my father to join her staff as her district director, opening a new chapter in our family's life and giving me a front row seat to government. I all but considered us partners by then, father and daughter, bound by the fascination we shared with the heady world of public service Dad now inhabited. As I got older, the more information I consumed, the more I recognized that government was a unique vehicle for massive change. Government could pass laws to give people civil rights, build literal bridges, and deploy the military to defend our democracy. And I marveled at the thought of one day playing a role in it. Admittedly, shouldering that lifelong ambition did not foster a normal childhood. My father was a scrappy, driven, working-class guy with something to prove. I inherited my drive from him. My mother was beautiful, poised, and self-assured. I derived my confidence from her. Throughout grade school, I marched in parades and knocked on doors for Dad's preferred candidates, wearing T-shirts, bearing campaign logos, and handing out literature. By 14, I was reading multiple newspapers each day. I never missed a Sunday episode of Meet the Press and spearheaded policy negotiations on The Hill in my head. At 16, I called in my first political favor and asked my dad to help me get an internship with a colleague of his, the political director of the New York State AFL-CIO, the largest federation of unions in the country. I thought it would provide both invaluable practical experience and an important credential as I applied to college. Like my father before me, I had my sights set on Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. But Dad wasn't as gung-ho about my request as I assumed he'd be. "Melissa," he said, sitting down across from me with a solemn expression on his face, the kind I generally only encountered when in trouble. If I help you with this opportunity, there will be people in this town who will never forget it. They'll always wonder if you deserve what you have." He exhaled deeply, putting his hand on my shoulder and leaned in close. "You're my daughter, so I will prop this door open, but you have to walk through it yourself. After that, you're on your own, which is in your best interest. Actually, it's your only interest. And Melissa," Dad continued, "don't kid yourself. You're a young woman who wants to make it in a male-dominated business. It's not fair, but the reality is you'll be judged differently. You're going to need to lace up your sneakers, run faster, and jump higher." He paused. "And never, ever let them see you sweat." Challenge extended and accepted. I was ready to dig in. It was 1999, and the AFL-CIO was preparing to endorse then First Lady Hillary Clinton for Daniel Patrick Moynihan's recently vacant U.S. Senate seat. Her opponent was New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, but health and marital problems prompted him to withdraw, putting Rick Lazio on the Republican ballot instead. It was more than a marquee contest. It was history in the making. The opportunity was a twofer. I was able to gain important experience while working to support a campaign for someone I looked up to. Hillary Clinton was my role model. Educated at Wellesley and Yale, she radiated strength, intellect, and effectiveness. Not only did she not shy away from a fight, she picked plenty of them on behalf of causes she believed in. She championed women and the working class, and she was as tough as they come, stronger than any male politician I'd ever seen. No matter how many times the far right or the media attempted to tear her down, she always seemed to come back stronger and more resolved than ever. The union was all in for Clinton, headquarters abuzz with everyone working around the clock, gaming out what the campaign was going to look like and what tactics they would deploy to ensure her success. My role was administrative: stuff envelopes, get coffee, and answer phones. I showed up early, stayed late, and tried to learn by osmosis. Sitting in on meetings when invited and eavesdropping on high-level conversations that were in earshot. Always eager, never complaining, I felt lucky to be near the room where it happened. But as I was doing the envelope stuffing and answering the phones, I liked to picture myself sitting in the war room someday, driving those conversations and mapping out strategy in a meaningful way, making a difference. In what would end up as the most expensive and highest-profile Senate race in the country's history, Clinton won, becoming the only former First Lady to ever serve in the United States Senate and the first woman elected to the Senate from New York. Meanwhile, I had won my first campaign too and was officially a member of Cornell's class of 2004. After graduation, though, diploma in hand, I did the unthinkable. I took a job as a fashion publicist for a clothing company, an unexpected offer that presented itself over beer pong during senior week. A friend's older sister had been working at a designer fashion company, Theory, as director of public relations and was looking for a press assistant. We hit it off and, in a moment of extreme impulse, I accepted. At the time, my parents had an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan that my sister Jessica was living in, a situation that allowed me to move to one of the most expensive cities in the world on a salary of $27,000 a year. A multi-billion-dollar cutthroat industry, fashion was demanding, hard-charging, and glamorous. I received my first BlackBerry along with instructions that I was to respond to emails within 15 minutes of receiving them, was taught how to pitch editors at Vogue, and brushed shoulders with Leonardo DiCaprio. I became fluent in the language spoken only by those devoted to the New York Post's Page 6, and I loved every minute of it. My parents played along with it for a time. But after a year, they were done. A message that was delivered over dinner with my father. Melissa, are we finished with this little experiment yet?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?